Greetings and salutations, fellow people who did not grow up with the 1996 movie Matilda and no one else. It's I, Eric J. Chucky, joined as always by a bouncing baby boy.
I referenced a movie before the podcast that was a little too young for him to have caught it in childhood. Can you tell?
It's the magic Venn diagram of a really old movie, and also, but you were too old to have watched it at the time.
Whereas I was not. Matilda was that good shit.
You can look back and go, you remember from childhood. And I go, you mean from when childhood was starting to end? From the end of childhood when I was too old to enjoy things? Yes, Pepperidge Farm remembers.
Well, that's not what we're here to talk about.
No, not at all.
As the delightful art shows, we are here to talk about Western animation in all its glory and splendor.
No, actually, we're here to talk about Western animation about half its glory and splendor. Maybe a third of its glory and splendor. Because, my God, what a list to narrow down. I thought the comic book ones were hard.
Yeah, but, no. There were so many cool, fun animation characters who either look great, or have great character arcs, or both. And they're from shows I like. I literally had to actually do, a round-robin tournament-style elimination to get my list. And it took a long time, and I had to do some stuff in HTML to do it quickly, and I felt really proud about that, but also, I think that expresses how many cool fucking cartoon characters there are.
Yeah. We thought about narrowing it down somehow, splitting it up into two lists, but how?
Well, I mean, we probably could have filled a top 5 with heroes and a top 5 with villains. Probably.
Maybe, but, there are some characters where it's but are they, though?
Yeah, let's insert any of, 4 characters on either of our lists, and it's kind of hard to say.
I mean, there's one specifically that I'm looking at near the bottom of my honorable mentions that it's a little...
So, we didn't. We just bit the bullet and tried to narrow down our top 5 favorite Western animation characters. This also means we'll be doing a top 5 for anime. To be perfectly honest, I expect that one to be a lot easier.
Same. I've not seen as many anime.
Well, it's just... Toonami was about it for both of us in childhood, right? No, you're not too old for Toonami. I know that shit.
Too old for the wave of Toonami you watched.
But not for Toonami.
No, I was there when it started, and then aged out.
But, for Western animation, it's what you grew up with. It's the firmament.
Sure.
And also, there's a lot of stuff we watched as adults that was really fun and good. And... just let's get into the damn list.
Well, before we do that, we have to shill for me.
Okay.
That's right, our sponsor for today's podcast is me.
So.
Give me your fucking money.
Like, comment, subscribe. Don't hit the bell. Rob is good. Speaking of Rob, Patreon exists. That's why Rob gets a shout out. And also because he's cool. There are books in the description, along with links to White's Twitch channel. Twitch.tv/WhiteRaven, I believe.
I think so.
And you can buy the books. And the most recently published one is a great jumping on point. I say the most recently published one because, well, we'll see. So, did I miss anything?
Did I say give me money?
You did.
Okay. Not just out of greed, because, people should be paid for their hard work and shit. I don't know that this podcast counts, but I do other stuff.
I'm looking at what's before me on the screen, and no, that's a beautiful labor you've made.
You know what? If you guys sub to the Patreon, $1, $5, I would have done the right thing and fixed Dr. Blake's neck there and made it the same color as the rest of her face. But this is the world we live in.
So, yeah. I'll start. So, as usual, we go from 5 down to 1, and my number 5 top favorite cartoon character, that is Western animation at least, is Hank Hill from King of the Hill. A phenomenon overseas, as I understand it. The cartoon is very popular in Japan. There's a big argument, subs versus dubs, which I love. But Hank Hill is great. Hank Hill is just a regular fucking guy. He's not perfect. He's got a lot of flaws, actually. But he's trying his best, and his heart's in the right place. He's very funny. He's in a very funny show, and he's one of two characters. The other one who didn't quite make it onto my list, who represent a big watermark change in your life, because him, and to a lesser extent Jake Morgendorffer, who isn't on my list, spoilers, represent a big change from when you watch the shows they're in, empathizing with the younger characters, and then there comes a day when you start empathizing with Hank Hill.
I always empathize with Hank Hill.
I was a weird kid. Me and Bobby were vibed when I was little.
Look, if I was a little younger when the show was on, I might have. But, like, I would look back and go, oh, yeah, I remember that.
But, yeah. Hank is great. He's a good man, but not a great man.
He does have that narrow urethra.
He's got that narrow urethra.
Yeah, that's...
And bad taste in women.
He just did what so many people do and married the first girl to show interest in them in high school and then was stuck with that because of his principles.
Poor Hank Hill. Chained to Peggy Hill, who is not on my top 5. I struggle to talk about like what I like about Hank Hill, because it's not any one particular thing. It's the overall vibe of the character, you know?
Hank Hill is my favorite slice of life anime protagonist.
That is the most succinct way of putting it, and accurate also. Yeah, okay, moving on. Who's your number 5?
My number 5 is the entirety of Mystery Inc. Somewhat pictured before you. I thought about trying to split them up, but much like how I feel about the Ninja Turtles, like, you can't. It's not the same. I don't know that I'd watch a show just about Shaggy and Scooby or Fred.
I, in fact, know I wouldn't, because the later seasons of the original series were pretty much just about Shaggy and Scooby and Scrappy fucking Doo, and I don't like those.
There was also the spin-off that it was Shaggy, Scooby,
Velma,
Flim Flam, and Daphne.
Oh, that one's worse somehow.
It had Flim Flam in it. He was okay.
Sure fucking did, my dude.
He was alright. But it was kind of funny adding them to this list, because I looked at a big series of lists of characters in Western animation, wrote them all down that, you know, who really spoke to me, and at first I would have categorized the Scooby-Doo cast as my mom's kind of cartoons. Because, like, I grew up watching it, but they were older, and it was something that she really identifies with. You might know, because she was on our podcast for Mystery Inc. from way back when.
Literally, I think, if not our most popular podcast, in the top 5.
Yeah, it's still in top 5, but some things have eclipsed it, thanks creator of Dallas and Robo.
Yeah, seriously, thanks.
Also, if you could convince John Cena to make more Dallas and Robo. But, like, especially with Mystery Inc., the show, like...
I think at least my favorite versions of those characters, certainly.
I think so. It hits that line that Disney live-action remakes aim for, but fail at. We are going to both send up and honor these characters you love while keeping them true to themselves. And that distillation of fandom culture and memes and stuff, before we would have called them that, meeting with the original text, the original intent, it's MCU quality.
It is very much so, yes.
And they're all great characters. They're all great archetypes. They get in great adventures. All of the morals are awesome, which is that you shouldn't trust people who tell you to trust them. And rarely is life so convenient as to make scary monsters the culprits of all of the crimes. Usually it's just an asshole.
Usually it's just a rich old white guy trying to get more money.
Beautiful, Scooby-Doo and your Scooby crew. I love most incarnations of Scooby-Doo. I love A Pup Named Scooby-Doo.
Good shout. Good shout. That show gets unnecessary shit. I reference Red Herring constantly.
It was a great bit.
It was a great bit.
The animation was really clean, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why it's there on my list. What's your number?
What's our number 4? Thank you very much.
I am sorry, comrade.
That's right. Dos Vidania, it is time to talk about Daria Morgendorffer.
I don't think she's very Russian.
No? But I wanted to finish the bit.
No.
It's just we both have her in the same place, so why not embrace it? Daria is fucking the character in cartoons I most sympathize and empathize with, like especially when I was a teenager. It was like they took my brain, put a brown wig and a green jacket on it, and put it on TV. It felt very much like who I was at the time. And
it says weird things about me sexually. Please continue.
Look, we're all dealing with it, okay? We're all dealing with it. You're very much a Jane Lane. We're just moving on with our lives, okay?
It's seminal, I think, is the best thing for it. If you were there in the time, whether on its original airing on MTV or when it was running reruns on Noggin, if you managed to exist in that magical, like, 10-ish years, 8-ish, that was life. It had its finger on the pulse of the American teenager in a way that cynical corporate advertisements never did or could. And, in fact, poked fun at those cynical corporate advertisements.
Desperately fucking wanted to.
Yeah.
It's just, that whole show is like a time capsule back to when I was a very specific age range. And
it still holds up.
Yeah. And it has the same watershed moment. I don't like Jake Morgendorffer as a person as much as Hank Hill, but there comes a day when you empathize with Daria, and then there comes a day when you empathize with Jake.
I believe my original version of the quote was, I spent my youth wanting to grow up to be like Trent Lane, and then I got to adulthood and I realized that I was Jake Morgendorffer. That was a past version of me. Now I'm I don't know. I think I'm back to Trent Lane again.
That's good. That's a good place to be.
Yeah. Complete the
Not
arc.
even Jake wants to be Jake.
No.
But she is a character with, again, one of the things I like about about Daria is the same thing I like about Hank Hill. She's got issues. She's got problems. She has rough edges that make her a hard person to be friends with.
Yeah, she's not isolated. She's not a Mary Sue in the traditional definition. She's not isolated from everybody else because she's too awesome and we want isolated young girls to connect with her. She's acerbic. She's mean sometimes. She doesn't want you to be her friend. She pushes people away and she mocks everyone she comes across.
And the only people who are her friends are people who have taken the time and effort to get past that layer of just armor into the person underneath. And her dynamic with Jane is one of my favorite parts of the series, because Jane takes none of Daria's shit, but not in a mean way. She just knows better.
Yeah, honestly, Daria meeting Jane is a very character-defining moment, and let's not speak of her time on Beavis and Butthead. That's not really a thing. It is, but it isn't.
That was a very different character.
But it's clearly, the turning point of the entire character happens in the first episode, and then throughout the rest of the series, we see how she grows up. Literally.
And there are pitfalls and stumbling blocks, and sometimes she doesn't make the best choices, and that's good. If Hank Hill is the best slice of life anime protagonist, I think Daria might be second.
She definitely, that series encapsulated high school.
Yeah.
Moving on to your number 3.
Yes, that's a good way of, because that way we keep the pattern. My number 3 is Mr. Ink. For all the reasons he mentioned and more. Again, I agree. I mentioned it earlier. Mystery Inc. specifically is the best version of those characters for me. It's the best distillation of them. They'll have complete character arcs, which they so rarely get, which is nice.
Yeah.
But I love almost all versions of these characters. Partially because they're fun. Partially because they often don't try and be anything more than what they are. Mystery Incorporated is a goofy concept. Scooby-Doo is a goofy concept. And the best versions of it know that.
I agree.
But I particularly like the dynamic of it's the Ninja Turtles rule. You can't separate them. You can't pull them apart from one another and have them work the same way. As a kid, I want to mention, I didn't like Freddy. He seemed like an asshole. Like a stick in the mud, kind of a... Okay, yeah, you go away and then the fun things happen. No, I was wrong. Child means a moron. Freddy's great.
Even in the original series, I think Freddy was kind of the character who was there for the adults in the room.
It's not that later versions of Freddy were better. It's that I was wrong. Freddy is great.
Yeah.
And he's very important to the dynamic. That's why I like most adaptational versions of them. I even like the Scooby-Doo movies. They're not the greatest movies, but they're fun.
Yeah.
They're not trying to be more than what they are, and they've got Matthew Lillard in them. So what's not to love?
Matthew Lillard is good in all things, except for Summer Catch, I think it was called. Bad movie.
Never seen that.
Don't.
Okay, I won't.
Number 3 for me is Winnie the Pooh. Which, let me tell you something, listener. That's a weird series of words, and it always has been, and it never won't be. And I don't just mean because Pooh sounds like poop, weird.
Winnie's also weird.
Winnie is weird, and that's the name, but every time it comes out of my mouth, I have so many questions.
It's unless you are culturally inured to it, it's not a phrase that makes fucking sense. It sounds like almost like a shitty wrestler nickname, unless you are culturally inured and unable to just
It sounds like the kind of shitty wrestler nickname an 8-year-old would come up with.
Yes.
But anyway, enough bagging on this character who I count as my 3rd favorite Western animated character of all time. His name. I think I can distill what I like about the bear into one situation. I was about the age one should be when Matilda comes out. And I had a dream that I was in great peril. And Winnie the Pooh was there beside me. And we were, riding on a minecart, and, all this shit was going on. And there was, personal, emotional drama as well. And he, looked up at me and was like, it's going to be okay. We're going to make it through this. And I woke up knowing that I would forever, inextricably, intrinsically, be connected to that silly old bear. And it remains a fact. He gives good life advice. He just goes through life doing his best. Some people have also gotten stuck in a window, as he did in a honey tree.
Winnie the Pooh is a meditation on contentment. Pooh Bear doesn't want for much. Pooh Bear wants his friends to be happy and to be around, but mostly the first thing. He wants honey and time for good times and to relax.
Yeah.
And really, is there a list of shit that you could want that's better than that? I don't think so. I feel like that's a good list.
I've never played another Kingdom Hearts game because the greatest moment in all of Kingdom Hearts happened in the first one when I opened a book and I was in 100 Acre Wood. You can't take that from me. And you can't duplicate it. The end. We just sort of hung out and did some shit. Fuck it, man.
Yeah.
Anyway, number 2 for you is a villain of ours.
Yes.
Someone who has defeated us personally.
And perhaps that's why he ranks so highly. So, you guys will have all seen this coming, I imagine. My number 2 is, and I think for a long time probably the number 1 until he was supplanted, is David Xanatos. Because he wins. He's just the best fucking cartoon villain, bar none. No ifs, no ands, no buts. He's an ultimate expression of a villainous archetype that has no second contender. Nobody does it like Xanatos. So much so that the dude has whole tropes, like reams of tropes, named after him. You don't call it the mastermind. You call it you don't like call it a mastermind plan. You call it a Xanatos gambit because of him. He is a guy who is charismatic, who is voice acted incredibly by I believe Jonathan Frakes.
Yes, ma'am.
He's almost always cool and calm and collected.
That's right. It was true.
But most importantly, he's a villain with principles. He's got principles that he doesn't bend on. He's not a monster. He's not a great guy. He wants what's best for him and his. But he's not a complete shithead. And that's really good for like a cartoon villain. That's really good for any villain, actually.
Sure.
There's a time for complete asshole who just wants to watch the world burn. That's not an invalid villain. But a guy who just happens to be at cross purposes to our protagonist is a very cool vibe and not something you get a lot in Western animation. Most villains are much more mustache twirly than that. And Xanatos is a breath of fresh air amongst that crew.
I also like him.
Who's your number 2?
My number 2 is Freakazoid from the short-lived animated series Freakazoid. The beautiful thing about this list and our top characters is that so many of them are the filtered through 1,000 crystal skull distillations of a concept. And Freakazoid is everything I love about absurdist comedy and goofy-ass superhero tropes in one character who is a rip-off of another character. Shh. Don't tell anyone. He's the reason I love characters like Howard the Duck. And it's that same sense of humor that was all over that show that was why I like stuff like Space Goes Coast to Coast and a lot of other shit like that. It's why a lot of weird shit like Big Top Burger appeals to me now. Because it's
that same vibe.
Wild, yeah, just running around. And because it was a Warner production, it had the licensing availability and the incredibly capable team behind it to make it like a part of a fabric, of a tapestry of stuff you already know. We can do the best parody because we have the real thing.
Yeah, we own the rights to these characters. We can parody them all we'd like, thanks.
And as much as I love a bunch of individual and side characters in the show itself, Freakazoid's the main one. He's everything about that. He's everything weird batshit I love about Clay Fighter. He's everything crazy that I enjoyed in that era and still appreciate today. There he is. He's blue.
Just hands up, zooming around the room.
He's zooming around the fucking room. Shout out to Ed Asner also.
Hey, you. Cut that out.
All right, let's do some honorable mentions, Chief.
Yeah, let's do it.
Run yours down first because yours are shorter.
My honorable mentions start with Charles Foster Off Denson from Metalocalypse. For a lot of complex fucking reasons. But, I mean, I can boil it down to the phrase, that's my bread and butter you're fucking with. Toph Bei Fong, the best earthbender in the world, the coolest character from that group of protagonists, and the one who the show should have been about. Don't at me. Goliath, because Xanatos is on the list. You don't think I didn't like gargoyles, right? And Goliath rules. Brock Sampson, because, by God, look, he's badass, and he has a lot of cool badass scenes. My favorite parts of Brock Sampson are when he's just trying to be a decent father to those boys, because their actual one is a shit show. The Genie from Aladdin, because, Robin Williams? I don't think I need to be more specific. Samurai Jack, that one is almost entirely based on Cool Force. He's just a really fucking cool character and a really cool animation style.
We've talked about how much we love The Mandalorian. I gather that's just what that is.
Yeah, pretty much.
the Time Mandalorian.
Shush.
The Mandalorian.
Ah! We cracked it wide open, folks. Hades, specifically from the Disney movie Hercules. In mythology, Hades isn't actually that bad a guy, but this version's a complete shitbag. Remember how I said sometimes that's what you want? This is that time. And Jane Lane, because I wanted a friend like Jane Lane when I was a kid, and I didn't have one.
Sucks to be you. My honorable mentions, which honestly, I also like Charles Foster Oftenson, and I think Jane might be in here. I don't know.
He's got a big list, everybody.
I tried to narrow it down to one per franchise, and sometimes I even broke that rule. So these are some highlights. Brack from the non-actual canon cartoon Space Ghost stuff. I don't think I could extract that character from my youth if I tried. So inspirational was that performance. Princess Carolyn from Bojack Horseman, because I feel like she's the best, as in terms of being a good person, character on that show. I couldn't say Bojack's my favorite. What a douche. I don't even really like him as a villain, although I do love the story and the journey. But Princess Carolyn is the person who's trying.
She's trying. Yeah, she's trying.
So for the same reasons we like Daria, that. Dr. Thaddeus Rusty Venture, because he's a fucking goof. I would have Brock Sampson on here too, but I absolutely adore the nail on the head, man full of himself and almost able to back it up if he would actually give 100%, 98%, work with me, Rusty. And the voice acting is phenomenal. Dr. Oxo, I went with over Oftenson because he's a rock and roll clown and he does a lot of cocaine.
He fell down.
I fell down. The entire Belcher family are good. Homer Simpson, out of all the Simpsons, I think the show's about him. Upon reflection, he's the linchpin that keeps it all together. He gets most of the best lines. He gets into the most interesting situations.
You don't hear me disagreeing?
Skeletor, because sometimes you want a screaming 1980s cartoon villain, and he's probably the most iconic.
He's tops of the tops in that. He's the chief of that tribe.
Starscream, because sometimes you want a screaming 80s cartoon villain to be really hot. Carl Bertanen-Analuski from Aqua Teen Hunger Force, because he's what if Hank Hill wasn't a good man and wasn't trying his best. And, if I knew that guy in real life, I'd hang out with him because I felt sorry for him, but also kind of dig his funny jokes. But I wouldn't hang out with him that much. Randy Marsh from South Park. I don't. When I watched that show as a kid, when I was younger, I watched it because it was edgy. What kept me watching that show for years was Randy.
For a long time, I watched an internet theorist, essayist video about this. For a long time, he was just the protagonist of the show. He wasn't always the main protagonist of an episode, but he was the one with a plot that carried through multiple seasons and character development.
Which explains why they are where they are now, and South Park is the Randy Marsh show, because that's what they've been doing this whole time. Those guys don't fuck around when it comes to storytelling. None of that was an accident.
That's true.
Goofy, that Goofy. I think you've heard of him.
Also, just a dad trying his best.
He's a dad trying his best who doesn't care what other people think about him. 90% of the time. Good for him.
Yeah.
The Genie from Aladdin. Like you said. Oogie Boogie is a burlap sack full of insects. Ursula is the baddest bitch.
Yeah, queen bitch.
And I love it when villains win for a little while. And she won for a little while. Lotso Huggin Bear, an incredibly compelling and interesting villain.
Where you really didn't need one. You did not. That was nobody needed the third Toy Story movie to go that hard.
But it did.
Yeah, it did.
It went heavy rain hard.
Yeah, it did.
Megamind, because wow, what a unexpectedly good character with a lot of silly characterization and fun, interesting quirks.
Megamind is like a fucking amazing movie.
Yeah, really good. Strong Bad, because I grew up when I did on the internet.
Yeah, that's fair.
And Steve from, as I said earlier, Big Top Burger, because I like clowns and absurdist humor. Alright. I'm not going to look straight at you, my brother. I'm going to look over here at this pigeon. The pigeon from the Mo Willems book series, Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus, excuse me, and other favorites.
My number one, my favorite character in Western animation is Iroh from Avatar the Last Airbender. He's... I guess much like Jane Lane, he's someone I wish I had had in my life. And I think a lot of people can sympathize and empathize with that, because almost no one's lucky enough to have an Uncle Iroh. And that's really sad. He's wise and empathetic and peaceful, but not weak. He's not a wilting, broken old man. He has an internal strength and I want to say honor, because he's not ironically very honorable for someone from his nation, how they would conceptualize that. But he has just like an internal font of wisdom and comfort.
If I may.
I'm finding it very hard to describe why I love this character.
I find that he is, much like a lot of the other characters on this list, an excellent distillation of a classic trope. The wise old grandfather, the kung fu master who is seen it all, fought it all, and is tired of it. He is Yoda. He is Pat Morita.
And he's also, like a lot of the versions of that trope who don't die, he's a surrogate father figure to probably the person in the show going through the most shit.
Sure.
And he, has his own hang-ups, his own issues, but a lot of his story revolves around wanting so desperately for what is effectively his son, for Zuko to be able to be the person that he knows he has the potential to be. I struggle to explain how good this character is, because it's done over in the entire run of a show that is otherwise also really fucking good. There are a couple scenes, I don't normally do this, but there are a couple scenes I can recommend you watch, because he's also really funny and fun, and he has a lot of good bits, but these probably won't work as well if you haven't seen the series. But I think my two favorite moments, well, let's go with three. The first two are connected. One is when he's in jail, and Zuko comes to see him, and he won't talk to Zuko, and then Zuko leaves, and it reveals that he's building up his strength to escape. The next scene is when they're eventually reunited, and in the middle of Zuko's long, profuse, shameful apology of betraying him, Iroh interrupts him to grab him and hug him and explain how proud he is that he got where he is eventually. And the number one scene is Leaves from the Vine.
I don't think you got to go on.
I'm going to cry if I do, so you go.
I think anybody, you can Google it, and anyone who's seen it has seen it. My number one, as I kind of spoiled earlier, but also I've talked about it a bunch of times in videos, and if you've been watching the podcast for a while, you've seen his softly smiling face staring at us in thumbnails, is Hank Hill. I don't know if I can summarize it better than I did earlier. I think there is a bit of a Tao to Hank Hill. And I think the man's existence outside of stereotypes. Hank is someone who doesn't fit in that passes. Hank is someone who has ended up the leader of his friend group by virtue of being the most whatever it is that friend happens to perceive in him. Whether that is the most successful, who has everything that that other friend wants,
Bill.
the most loyal, because he knows that no matter how bad he fucks up, you transferred your emotions into me. He'll be there for him.
Damn.
Whether it's... He's the one who's the most willing to talk and share his ideas, and perhaps the most capable of it.
Boomhauer.
He tries his best to be a good dad. He fights against everything he was taught to do better for his son, who he doesn't understand.
Fun, and the important, an important part of that is that he never stops trying. No matter how ridiculous and awful Bobby Hill gets, Hank can get mad, Hank can get stern, but he never stops trying to understand his son. He never gives up on him.
And he struggles with himself. I can pinpoint the episode where he enters competitive dog dancing with Ladybird. And at first he's ashamed of himself because he's having fun dancing with his dog in his garage. But, like, the dog enjoys it, and he enjoys it, so he gets over his shit.
And he learns to just find his joy.
And accept that about himself, no matter what somebody else might say. I think the strongest parts of the show are in the things that are never said. I think the strongest parts in the character are by contrast to the rest of the world as we understand it. He is a less idiotic and more capable Tim Taylor, while also not being as fallible and beleaguered as Dan Connor. He is your everyman and no man. And sometimes, in a tornado, he loses his pants and you see his butt. His weird little butt.
It is very small.
Because I can sit here and speak poetic about this character and the people around him for a long fucking time.
But ultimately, he's the protagonist of a comedy series.
He is, man. And, like, I love that they managed to put all of that into this series that is also Hank feels awkward because he saw his niece's bra. Like, it is the human condition. It is life's experiences condensed.
I don't think we're going to do better than that.
No.
Everything's better when nerds talk about it.